Folks, on the live stream, Restoring Darkness live stream. We're here at the Smithsonian, the Lights Out exhibit. If you're watching this, you can see it recovering our night sky, and we're very honored to be joined by Shannon Willis.
Hi.
She is an exhibition and graphic designer, originally from Maryland, now residing in North Bethesda. Alongside her life as a designer, she is a devoted pet parent with 2 dogs and enjoys diverse creative outlets such as art, design, building, dining out, and horror movies. Shannon's lifelong passion for arts and crafts led her to pursue studies in industrial design at Virginia Tech and graphic design at the Art Institute of Washington. For the past 13 years, she has been an invaluable member of the Museum of Natural History, utilizing her creative prowess to design engaging exhibitions. Shannon's enthusiasm and commitment to her craft drive her to constantly seek new opportunities for growth and expand her knowledge. Her dedication and transformative work leave a lasting impact on design at NMNH. That's the National Museum of Natural History, right?
Yes.
The National Museum of Natural History, delighting visitors and contributing to the museum's success. And we're very, very happy that she's helped out with this display, Lights Out, Recovering Our Night Sky at the Smithsonian. Tell us how you contributed to this display, Shannon.
So I'm an exhibit designer here at Natural History, and I designed Lights Out. I guess the process of design is a collaborative effort, but normally, I start with kind of getting a sense of what the content is, kind of what it feels like visually. So I'll do like an initial search for things that have to do with what we're going to talk about, and just try to get an aesthetic, vibe about the space and what I'm going to do. And then usually I get script from our writer, and I start to play with the panels and the colors and the fonts and try to get a sense of how to visually tell the story, to get people to kind of feel the content, as it were, when you're reading it. Obviously the visual impact helps you understand or either, engage with it differently. So that's what my role is here, to design the space. How long
ago did you start working on the Lights Out exhibit?
It's been 2 years.
2 years?
Yeah, it's been 2 years. And, there were some delays with the pandemic, but, I think partially too, I tend to get a jump start on designs before I start a show. Like, even if I haven't fully gotten anything to work on yet, I just do background research and just kind of get some visual inspiration together. So probably 2 years and a little before that, just thinking about what I wanted to do.
From start to opening the exhibit.
Yep.
Wow.
What was the most difficult part?
It's funny because I feel like this show, I actually felt visually, I felt like I resonated with it, and I was really excited to start it. So it, some shows with the content, maybe it's just a little bit harder to wrap your head around, or maybe it's just visually harder to tell a story. But I don't know, I was really excited about, doing something about light pollution, the night sky. I knew that the imagery would be great. So I feel like I kind of rolled into the design of it pretty early on and had a good flow. I think it just gets more difficult when you're narrowing it down with content to make sure, like, okay, I did pie in the sky, like I want things to look this way, but now it needs to be readable, it needs to be accessible, it needs to tell the story specifically this way. And so it's more that it just, as you work through it, it gets a little bit more specific.
It sounds to me like it touched you a little bit, like this particular exhibit. Like you learned a lot. Did you know much about light pollution before you started?
No. I knew it existed, but I certainly learned a lot with this show. Most of the content is new to me in terms of the specifics of light pollution and all the things that go into creating it and how, things that you could do to solve it. I think the thing that probably stood out to me the most was the solutions that you can do to help mitigate those, the impacts that we have, even on a smaller level, because you think of something that's so vast and think like, oh, okay, well, there's not much I can do, but, but I didn't know anything really about light pollution to this scale. So this show has been great for me too.
I know everything's great, but what's your favorite part of the exhibit? If you had to pick one section.
Wow. Okay. I guess my favorite part was, it's probably the insect animal section where we talk about how it impacts other life. I think one, it was an opportunity to design several different case displays, and so that content is very different and it's kind of layered. So and I look at things from a graphic perspective. So I like doing the wallpapers, and there's illustrations and the text, and cases are a little different because there's 3 dimension to it. So I would say that's probably my most interesting section. Plus, I also think I learned the most about not just impact to us, but to everything else.
Yeah.
Well, light pollution is pollution, and I
Yeah,
think a lot of
exactly.
people only see it as a metaphor.
Yes.
They're saying like, well, so you mean it's kind of like pollution, but it isn't. Actually, if you walk through this display, you're going to find out how light impacts all manner of different things.
Yeah.
And so, if you're listening, come on down to Washington, D.C. and check out the Lights Out exhibit. When you're starting the process, so it sounds like you're involved from the beginning of the exhibit, from the conception phase through to its completion, to the grand opening or whatever it is, right? How do you start thinking about a display like this? What are you thinking? How do I show light pollution? Do I use light? It's going to be inside. Like, how do you start thinking that through?
I guess I generally start from a visual standpoint. So first, like with this show, when I knew what the concept was, we have like an initial meeting where we're talking about the ideas and kind of where we want to go with the project. I start thinking about, okay, well, what stories are we going to tell, and how can we do that visually? So it might be, and I'm sure lots of the ideas that I draft in the beginning probably don't end up making it into the show, because either it's like, we can't do that, it's too grandiose, or it just doesn't make sense for the space. But I start thinking about like the visual elements first, and then I say, okay, well, we want to tell a story like the intro, where it's kind of a semi-interactive. You're looking at what your night sky might look like on a Bortle scale. And then I think, like, how do we do that in a way that engages not just one sense, but like multiple senses? So, and I start to, sketch out ideas about how we can make things, 3-dimensional or interactive. And then once I start going through those details, those sketches become 3D models on a computer, and then we run through feasibility, and then we talk about budget. And so, a lot of it is fine tuning. Yeah, I would say fine tuning, where then you have like these great ideas, and then you're like, that's financially impossible. So then you figure out how to do that in a reasonable way. And so that's kind of how I go through the process.
Do you have any idea how long the exhibit will last?
I think it's up 2 or 3 years. 3 years.
3 years total.
Yeah. I think it goes on the road after that. As I was talking with,
we'll travel.
It's so important, because if this is the place that we go along here, the whole row of the mall and all the museums and the monuments and all that. This is a great American flex down here. So if you haven't been to DC, get down here, because there's nothing like this outside of Europe. I'll tell you that. I've been to Ottawa in Canada. I'm Canadian. I've been around. This is a flex. But when it gets into the Smithsonian, that's when there's something about that this is actually a scientific issue. This matters.
Yes.
People need to know about this, and so I feel like the movement's arrived, Greg Eric.
That's good. Exciting.
With us here at the Smithsonian. If you're out there listening to this or watching it on LinkedIn or Twitter or wherever you are right now, come on down to DC, take a trip, bring your family, bring your friends, and check out, while you're here, the Lights Out exhibit, Recovering the Night Sky, at the National Museum of Natural History, right here in beautiful Washington, D.C. Is there any final thoughts, Shannon, before we close off the live stream, that you want to tell people listening?
I just hope that they do come down and actually see it for themselves. I think it's got a lot of information, and while it's got a lot of text, it's visually digestible, and I think it's actually really important. And I think they'll walk away with a really good understanding of light pollution, and that it's not such a daunting task that we can't help to resolve.
Part of the exhibit, if you're listening to this, folks, is there's a beaded piece of artwork done by a First Nations artist. I can't remember her name right off the top of my head. But if you look at it for a while, it's spectacular. It's of the Milky Way, and it's very, very beautiful. Just one reason to come down and check it out. There's all sorts of things back there you really enjoy. Thanks for listening. And we'll be back in about 2 minutes with our next guest. So just give us 1 minute here, folks.